Great, great. Well, welcome everyone. I want to thank Pedro Hernandez for doing our tech and Elizabeth Thompson for producing. And I really want to build on what Renee Lertzman has just so beautifully talked to us about and the whole team of Project Inside Out, which is so important in this moment. And, Renee asked me to do a meditation. And what I'd really like to do is extend what the beautiful meditation Sarah Payton guided us through can live within our experience. And I'd like to really extend that, Renee, if that's okay with you. And we didn't actually plan on this, but after hearing you speak, Renee, I feel like the kind of contemplative practice that would be really attuned to what's happening here in our gathering, in this convening, is to try a conceptual journey that is a kind of contemplation, but that builds on the sensory experience that Sarah Payton so beautifully did. And so this is a question for Pedro. We didn't practice this. Can I share some slides? Does that work, Pedro, for me to do that? I don't know if you can give me a thumbs up, or I don't even know
Yes.
how I would. Is that a yes?
Yep. If you just pull up
I'll do the share screen and do the Microsoft, the PowerPoint.
just
Okay.
just
Let's
the
see how
green
this
button.
goes. So this is actually really attuning to what Renee asked. She said, can you guide us through an experience? And then she and I will have a fireside chat. So what I'm going to invite you to do is really allowing yourself to resonate with the beautiful reflective practice we did with Sarah Payton. Now, just drop into, and I usually don't do slides these days, but I'd like your eyes to take in some of the words I'm going to say. And then if you review the recording of this, I know we're going to cover a lot of material, but I think this is going to get to the ARCs. I'm an acronym person. So, the attunement, the reveal, ARC, the convening, what's the E?
Equip.
Equip, and then sustain, right? So I'm an acronym person. So when people speak, I think, okay, I'm going to remember that. So the beautiful ARC's invitation from Project Inside Out really is that all 5 of those incredible guiding principles, which is a funny pun because, of course, it's about guiding and it's guiding principles, is really about energy. Each of them is about energy. So, Renee gave me that lovely introduction, and I'll just say that the framework that you're going to hear these comments from is called interpersonal neurobiology. And it's basically, imagine if you could approach all the different fields of knowing. And we begin with sciences. So everything from mathematics and physics all the way to sociology and anthropology, and put them into one framework. So that's what we do in a series that I edit. I'm the founding editor of an interpersonal neurobiology IP&B series. We have now 75 textbooks. So if you want to read, there's a lot of professional textbook reading you could do, and a number of more accessible books for the general public. But the issue I want to start with is that when we're thinking about the environment and environmental health and the planet and the invitation that Sarah Payton has invited us so beautifully experience, how do we go from the centering in the body and the sensations of the body to imagining the world as a body, and as Renee Lertzman beautifully said, that we love? How do we do that? So all of that for me has to do with the broad notion of what we can call mind meaning our subjective experience. For example, am I the world, or am I just this body? Am I told, as we've been hearing, from so many sources, that I'm alone here? Or am I actually part of something much bigger than this body, broader than this brain, and something connected even across time? And so to address those really important meditative questions we were asked, what I want to start with is the notion that your mind is what is wrestling with those questions. It is the human mind that is creating environmental destruction, as we'll entertain in a moment. And it's the human mind that can reverse that destruction to a regenerative world, a world that Paul Hawken talks about in the book that Renee referred to, Drawdown. And in being on a board with Paul Hawken, I really love the way he really approaches it in a very positive stance. So in times that we've taught together, actually, and Renee was at this meeting, you know, it's very possible to get depleted, to feel demoralized, to feel like there's no hope. But there actually is a great deal of possibility, as we'll see, when we look at the mind as the source of the trouble and the source of the solution. So in the writings I've done over the last 25 years, the proposal, and this is a whole nother way of thinking about it, is that your mind is actually some property of energy flow. Certainly that involves your brain and your head, but involves your entire body. And as we'll come to see, if we deeply understand energy, and that's what this meditative practice we're about to do is focusing on, we might be able to see a new way to approach the inside out stance towards helping the planet. So in speaking with physicists, what physicists tell us, besides the usual thing we hear is that energy is the ability to do work, is this phrase from another branch of physics than the usual, what's called Newtonian or classical physics. It's from quantum physics that says energy is the movement from possibility to actuality. Now, if you just do some reflection right now on this simple slide, what is energy? The movement from possibility to actuality. And just consider times today, perhaps, or yesterday, in listening to the news, in smelling the smoke if you're on the west of the United States, and feeling that you just have no more energy to go forward, that you feel like it's hopeless, that there's no way to help. You feel depleted of energy. You might even say that. Well, one way of understanding that is you're feeling that there are no more possibilities to turn into actualities. We're done. So hopelessness, suicidality, a feeling of despair, all of these can be understood as the way the mind has gotten stuck, where possibility cannot move anymore to actuality. And that experience then invites us to say, well, can we explore this simple slide in a scientific way? And that's what we're about to do. So you might want to put on your seatbelts, because this view is not what you usually hear when you think about mental experience or memory or attention or anything else we study in psychology or psychiatry. But for me, it's really a deep dive into the aspects of the mind that are really important for an inside-out approach to attunement, to what it means to be revealing and be a compassionate guide. You know, what it means in all these ways of taking in the world, of convening people together, right? And of equipping them with what they need, and then sustaining things, so that in this simple slide, we're going to now go through a deep, deep dive. So just sit back. You don't need to worry about the details, but just let it wash over you. So if Sarah Payton's beautiful meditation could be considered a sensory immersion, what we're about to do is a conceptual contemplative practice, which is equally as important. You know, I've done some teaching with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and he laughs when people say that meditation is just about sensation. And he says, no, it's not. It's also about rational thinking and having concepts that we need to deal with so we can apply them in all these arses kinds of ways, you know, of really being effective. So, so sit back, and this is going to build on the beautiful sensory immersion we have with Sarah Payton. And now I'm going to invite another aspect of your mind, the contemplative mind, to bring conceptual processes into the foreground. And that's fine too. It's another way of meditating. Meditating simply means training the mind. And this is what we're going to do. This is all based on science. And if you want to read more about it, it's in all the different books, Aware, Mind, The Developing Mind, 3rd edition. But just sit back here and just let it wash over you. So here we go. Let's see if I can run the slides. The first thing to say is that if you graph out, and these drawings are from my daughter, Madeline Siegel, who Renee has interviewed. She's an environmental science graduate student and works at the Attorney General's Office in Environmental Protection in New York. She has drawn these drawings. And if you imagine that possibility is at the bottom of this graph, where the up and down axis is the movement, if you will, from the bottom where possibilities are sitting all the way to the top where actualities are created. So that y-axis of the diagram could be called a probability distribution curve. And if, as an example, we have 1 million words we could share, and right now there's 1 million that you have, that I have, and I'm not going to tell you which one I'm thinking, and I say to Renee or to Sarah or Elizabeth or Pedro, I say, okay, what's the word? You'd have a 1 out of 1 million chance of knowing. So at that point, we'd say the probability is that point A, 1 out of 1 million, right? So it's not quite 0. So in physics terms, we would place the value as near 0. That's what that term means. But if you say 0, that's okay. But it's not really 0. It's close to 0, 1 out of 1 million. And then we see, oh, I say ocean, and we've popped up to an actuality. So what we mean by energy is we move from this place of possibility at the bottom up to an actuality. I've said ocean. And we could go on and show you in this point C, for example, that if there were just one of the 5 oceans I'm thinking about, that it would be at a higher point. See that 1 out of 5? So 1 out of 5 is 20%. 20% is much more likely. It's more certain than down at 1 out of 1 million. But it's still not an actuality yet. It's a probability, that point C. And then if I say Indian Ocean, it rises up to an actuality. So whether you're going from A to A1 or C to C1, that's what we call energy flow. So when we say you're depleted or feel hopeless, it's that you can't move in a way from the possibilities that could be there, or the probabilities, into actualities, and so we feel lost and despairing. Now, what that means also is that at the bottom, if we make it a 3-dimensional graph with the diversity of things that could possibly be there, it becomes a 3-dimensional shape, which is the shape of a plane. And so from the point of view of physics and in the mathematics of what are called systems, we would call this a plane of possibility. It's the quantum vacuum in quantum physics terms, or as Arthur Zients likes to call it, the sea of potential. And this sea of potential is something that exists in the world, and it's something that within these bodies we're born into, we can tap into. It's a generator of diversity. It's the formless source of all form. So just rest with that for a moment and know that we actually live in a world where this is considered, in physics terms, a part of reality. And when we talk about energy, it means that potential energy is resting there. And as energy flows, it arises from this plane of possibility. And when we experience a practice like Sarah Payton did, what I'm going to suggest to you is that what she's inviting us to do is have a cold state of mind. We can be curious, the C, open to what's happening, the O, accepting of what's happening, and filled with a vital force of energy we can simply call love. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that the attunement that we're focusing on today in this first part of the Project Inside Out inaugural presentation comes from this cold state. That when you can find that cold state, it's actually allowing you to tune in, which can mean 2 things. You tuning in or focusing attention on the inner experience of someone else. And the second thing is you allow yourself to resonate. This cold state is what allows that. And we're going to see that the uncertainty of that plane of possibility, and the hub means something we're going to see in a moment, has some very, very interesting possibilities I'm going to explore with you. And the diagram then that allows that cold state to be understood can be amplified in this way, that you have the plane of possibility there at the bottom. You've got those elevated places, like when I said 1 of 5 oceans, that probability as a plateau. And then when things become actualized, they're peaks. So if you make a commitment, for example, you're going to do this action for the environment, or you find you're an educator, or you're a guide, or you're a cheerleader, whatever it is, and you're committing yourself, you're then setting up a plateau, which then allows certain peaks to arise from that. And that's how the mind functions, as you'll see, that we have thinking and emotion and memory as peaks, and as these thought, emotion, memory as peaks, and thinking, emoting, and remembering is just beneath those peaks. And then a state of mind, like I'm in a positive state of mind where I can bring love to the world to try to actually help people not feel defeated and hopeless, but actually engage them in actions that will improve the environment, whether that's your citizen in everyday life or a CEO of a company. And that's what I'm going to do from this plateau of action. But it comes from, if you can see this, a state of this open awareness that we're going to talk about now. This is what I would propose to you comes from the plane of possibility. Now you may say, that's kind of weird. What is he talking about? So let's just look at where these ideas come from. There's a simple practice. You can do it on our website. In the old days when we can meet in person, I've done this with over 50,000 people in person. And the first 10,000, I did a surveys and recorded all the things of what people's experiences were. And it's a simple practice, and I'll just describe it to you, where it's a table in our office, but it looks like a wheel. So we call it the wheel of awareness, not the table of awareness. And the hub of that wheel is where you could place the experience of knowing of consciousness. So if I say hello, you have two things in consciousness going on. You have the awareness that I said hello. We put that in the metaphoric hub of a wheel of awareness. And the sound hello, we would put on the outside, on the rim. So the knowns are points on the rim. The knowing, or pure awareness, is in the hub. And then we take a metaphoric spoke of attention and we move it around. This can take about 25 minutes to actually do, but the setup takes a while, which is why we're not doing it here. But when you do this yourself, you come to find that people have experiences, and you may have those too, that are profoundly what are called integrative. That is, you are differentiating and then linking, which is how we're defining the word integration. And as you differentiate and link the first five senses in that first segment of the rim, from bodily sensations, the second segment of the rim, from mental activities like emotions, memories, and thoughts and ideas on the third segment, and then your sense of relatedness, what we can call interconnection, what, if you keep the numbers going, would be the eighth sense. And then you even take the next step of correlating that to this diagram we've created. It looks like from the survey that while we can look at the brain, which I do in all these different books, to really understand consciousness and identity, we need, I believe, to move to the science of energy. What it looks like might be going on, and this could be wrong, but it could be right, and this gets exactly, I think, what Inside Out is all about, is that the rim of that wheel, the metaphoric wheel of awareness, the rim is actually plateaus and peaks, and the hub correlates with our proposal of a mechanism of the plane of possibility. Now, just looking at this one slide, you may come to say, well, if you go back to the first slide, energy is the movement from possibility to actuality, then this suggests that the metaphoric practice, which you can do every day, I do it every day, is allowing you to differentiate that plane of possibility from the probabilities and actualities that arise in the mind. Now, that can take you a long time to just sit with that. But if you practice the wheel as an immersion and consider these concepts, here's what comes up. We have times when plateaus limit which peaks arise, and we can also have peaks arise directly from the plane. And we come to realize, and this was the cover of the Scientific American Journal, a very conservative science journal for the public. And this came out the month before the book Aware came out, which really alleviated a lot of my anxiety, because the science journal, Scientific American, summarized what physics has arrived at telling us, which is that we have two realms of one reality. Now, I'm trained as a physician, and I try to keep very conservative in my medical practice. And I try to keep things based in science. I do. I'm a scientist also, and so I'm used to empirical studies and basing things on science. This is science, what I'm about to say to you, even though when I hang out with quantum physicists, they tell me they're very lonely, because when they go to parties and try to talk about their empirical findings, people roll their eyes and say, oh, that's just fiction. It's not fiction. Consider this. It's kind of like if you go for a swim in a lake or the ocean or a river, or let's say a pool. You have the experience of being on land in the air. That's one realm. And in the one reality, you have another realm is being in water. And the properties of being in water are different than being on land. And so those are two realms of one reality. Well, we also have this issue that looks like this, that we have two realities, two realms, one reality. Let's repeat that. We have one reality and two realms. Now, this becomes incredibly important for Project Inside Out, because as you'll see, I think humanity has gotten locked into these plateaus where it convinces itself the only thing that's real is this one realm at the top, the classical Newtonian realm. Why is it called Newtonian? Isaac Newton proposed certain properties about large objects, like, for example, planets, or like the apple that fell from the tree. And these are entities. These are noun-like entities. They have what's called an arrow-bound unfolding of time, meaning a directionality of change because of the second law of thermodynamics, but don't worry about that. That applies to just the large objects. And because we live in bodies, we have an experience of being convinced that the only realm that is real is being separate. So I'm separate from Renee, who's separate from Sarah, who's separate from Elizabeth, who's separate from Pedro, and we're all separate from each other. And it's like Sarah Payton beautifully said, we're given this message that we're alone. And we think we're separate from nature. Oh, we can go to a park, but we don't mind trashing the park because it's not who we are. Now, this classical physics, or Newtonians, those are synonyms, macro state realm, is one realm that is real. When you get in a car, you want to press on the brakes and you want to stop the car at an intersection so you don't become one with everything. However, in the quantum realm, this microstate realm, which can be studied with things the size of photons and electrons, there are no entities. Nope. No noun-like entities. There are just verb-like events, which for a person with a body seems weird. So we go, oh, that's dumb. Dan is dumb. Why did Renee ask him to come? This is ridiculous. But this is science. And amazingly, in this quantum microstate realm, just like when you float in the water and you go, whoa, I'm floating. I don't float up on land. How can I float here in water? Well, there are different properties that exist in different realms of one reality. And in this realm, it's arrow-free. There's no directionality of change, and things are massively interconnected.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in here, and I'd like us to shift into our conversation in a minute.
Sure. Let me just finish with 2 slides, and then we can, I'll shut the slides down if you don't mind. Because it gets to the following point, and I'll just get to this here, that we'll skip all this thing. Let's just get to this, that I think what Project Inside Out can do is allow you to learn to live from the plane, which invites people to approach things with this incredible sense of hope. They tap into this generator of diversity where they learn things from that place. They let things happen. They get in touch with the longing for how the world could be. They lean into it. You can even have fun and be laughing. You love from there and you lead or guide from there. And the final slide is this one, which is that when you incorporate reflective practices like the wheel or other ones that allow you to tap into that hub or the equivalent of it, what I think that does is and this is, I'm not giving you the examples, but if I give you example after example, if people experience this after a 25-minute practice, they realize that their identity, their sense of belonging shifts so that instead of it being, let's say, non-integrated, that is, it's just in my body as a me, they realize that we, the relational mind, is as much who they are as their bodily defined self. And when you try to integrate that, honoring differences and cultivating linkages, you don't get rid of the body self that gets about 100 years to live, but you are a me, that's fine, but you're connected to a we that is all these relationships we have. So we are the planet, you know, and as Joanna Macy beautifully says, it's world as self, world as lover, you know, and Joanna and I talk a lot about the we notion. And the we idea of identity is what in our field, interpersonal neurobiology, and the we community that is growing from that, we feel deeply from a scientific point of view that the pandemic is an opportunity to shift identity, that the inside out approach for us would be actually moving from modern cultural lies of a separate self that in fact may be lethal lies that are leading to the destruction, the racism, and all the things that we are terribly seeing as chaos and rigidity in the world. And a more integrated way of living would be as a we. So I'll just conclude there, stop sharing my slides, and just leave you with those conceptual notions. And I look forward to discussing more. Thank you for your attention.